When you look back, humanity's really big leaps in understanding reality, they haven't just come from finding new answers.
No, not within the old ways of thinking anymore.
Exactly. They've come from completely reimagining what existence is. Think about the giants, right? Descartes, Newton, Einstein, the quantum physicists.
Yeah, each one of them really shifted our core assumptions, didn't they? Pushed the boundaries.
Totally. Leading to huge revolutions in science and how we even think.
They forced us to see the universe in fundamentally new ways, moving from one way of seeing things, one paradigm, to the next.
And that brings us to today. We're diving into what many are calling the next big evolution in that line, motion theory.
Right.
And it's built on a premise that sounds radical, but is also kind of elegant. The idea is that everything that exists, literally everything you see and experience, is just fundamentally structured motion.
It's a simple core idea, but the implications are huge. This deep dive is really about exploring the philosophy behind that.
It feels like a massive philosophical shift. I mean, for centuries, we've mostly thought of the universe as full of things, objects.
Objects moving through space and time. That's the standard picture.
Yeah. But motion theory seems to just flip that completely. It sees reality not as a bunch of things, but as, what, a seamless flow, a continuum of rhythmic patterns in motion itself.
Exactly that. It's not stuff moving, it's the movement that constitutes the stuff.
Okay, so if I'm getting this right, every phenomenon, like from the tiniest subatomic particle right up to whole galaxies, they aren't really objects or events in the old sense.
No, they're viewed as manifestations of structured, synchronized motion. It's just a totally different lens.
A new way to view reality.
Precisely. And our mission today really is to give you a kind of shortcut to understanding this perspective. We want to try and conceptually rebuild the universe using just this one core idea motion. Pull out the key bits of knowledge so you can really get a feel for its implications and its unifying power.
All right, let's try and unpack that. Historically, those big thinkers you mentioned, they use concepts like matter, energy, forces, fields.
The building blocks as they saw them.
Right. But motion theory seems to step back and ask, what if all of those things? What if every single phenomenon can be described just by asking, what is the motion doing?
Yes, and that's where it cleverly sort of reframes the past. Descartes, okay, he had his dualism, mind and matter, but even he saw motion as absolutely key in the physical world.
And Newton gave us the laws for it. Grounded physics in predictable patterns of motion.
Then Einstein came along and showed how motion actually warps space and time themselves, made them relative.
And even quantum mechanics, which got really weird and complex.
Yeah.
It still had motion right at its heart, didn't it? Just at tiny scales.
Absolutely. But here's the really interesting bit, the reversal you mentioned.
Go on.
All those previous frameworks, more or less, treated motion as something that happens to things. It emerges because matter interacts or forces act.
Right, it's a consequence.
But motion theory flips it. It suggests motion is the fundamental thing, the absolute foundation. Everything else emerges from motion.
So matter isn't the basic stuff, it's just a stable pattern of motion.
Exactly, like a persistent whirlpool. And energy isn't fundamental either, it's just the intensity of that motion, maybe.
Wow. Okay. And what's really fascinating, you said, is how this actually works with quantum mechanics, not against it.
Yeah, that's one of its strengths. Quantum mechanics brought in all these puzzling ideas, uncertainty, probability, entanglement, things that seem to break classical rules.
Things that seem paradoxical.
Right. But in this framework, this structured motion synchronization idea, they aren't paradoxes anymore. They start to look like natural consequences.
Okay, let's take an example. Wave-particle duality. That classic quantum headache where things like light or electrons sometimes act like tiny balls, particles, and other times spread out like waves.
A puzzle that really bothered physicists for ages.
So how does motion theory handle that? Does it just dissolve the paradox?
Pretty much, yeah. Particles and waves stop being these contradictory things you have to choose between. They become complementary ways of looking at motion states.
How so?
Imagine a particle not as a tiny solid thing, but as a really stable, localized loop of structured motion, like a self-contained eddy in a river. Very stable, very localized.
Okay, like a little vortex.
Exactly. And the wave aspect. That just describes how that motion pattern propagates, how its influence spreads and synchronizes through the underlying motion field it exists in.
Like the ripples from that vortex spreading out.
Precisely. It's one unified phenomenon, structured motion, just viewed from different aspects. its localized structure, or its propagation. It's actually quite elegant.
That does clear things up conceptually. Okay, what about entanglement? The spooky action at a distance thing.
Ah, yes. Einstein's famous phrase for it.
Where you have two particles linked somehow, and measuring one instantly affects the other, even if they're light years apart. That seems to defy locality, right?
It does in the classical view. But within motion theory, it's maybe not so spooky. It could be a direct result of them sharing a single, synchronized motion state that was established when they were created, when they interacted initially.
So they're not sending a signal faster than light.
No, it's more like, imagine two tuning forks perfectly synchronized. If you dampen one, the way the other vibrates changes instantly, not because a message traveled, but because they were always part of the same, larger vibrational pattern. Their motions were intrinsically linked from the start.
They're just resonating together as part of a single system, even when separated.
That's the idea. Their motion states are fundamentally connected through synchronization.
The unifying power here really starts to hit home. I mean, traditionally, science carves reality up, doesn't it? Physics does forces, chemistry does atoms, biology does life.
Separate boxes, separate disciplines.
But motion theory seems to be suggesting it's all just one story, one elegant narrative based on motion.
That's the goal, yes. In this view, even fundamental forces, gravity, electromagnetism, the nuclear forces, they might not be totally separate things in the way we usually picture them.
So what are they then?
Maybe different kinds of structured synchronization patterns, different ways motion fields organize and interact at different scales or densities.
So gravity, for instance, instead of mass pulling mass.
It could be the result of large-scale synchronization gradients. Basically, how the flow of the underlying motion substrate organizes itself around dense pockets of localized, synchronized motion, what we perceive as mass. This large-scale pattern creates the effect we call attraction.
And chemistry. Things like atomic bonds, reactions.
Yeah.
Isn't that just motion loops interacting and finding stable patterns? It sounds almost too simple when you put it like that.
Maybe elegant is a better word than simple. The idea is that atomic structures are these incredibly stable, synchronized patterns of subatomic motion loops. And chemical reactions. That's when these patterns interact and reshuffle, seeking new arrangements, maybe more stable or efficient synchronization states, like finding new harmonies in the motion.
It's all about the interplay of rhythm and structure seeking equilibrium.
Exactly, the dynamics of structured motion.
Which leads to life itself then. Biology, DNA, metabolism, even consciousness. Are these just layers upon layers of more complex motion loops?
That's the extension, yes. Life becomes this incredibly adaptive, dynamic system built on nested hierarchical synchronization. DNA isn't just static code, it's a dynamic motion pattern that replicates and orchestrates other motion patterns.
And metabolism is just the flow and resynchronization of energy patterns through the system.
Precisely. It potentially offers a continuous picture, integrating from the smallest quantum effects right up through chemistry to the complexity of living organisms and even ecosystems.
And you mentioned this even reaches into cosmology, which honestly, that blows my mind a bit. The standard model we use, lambda CDM, it relies on things like dark matter and dark energy.
Right, these components we have to add in to make the observations fit the equations. Dark matter to explain why galaxies spin faster than they should. Dark energy to explain why the universe's expansion is accelerating.
And motion theory suggests we might not need them, or at least not as mysterious substances.
It offers alternative interpretations, yes. That's what's fascinating. Take those galactic rotations. Instead of needing unseen dark matter particles providing extra gravity, it could be an expected outcome of how structured motion synchronizes over vast distances. Gravity itself might be behaving differently on those scales because it's an emergent property of these large motion patterns, not just a force between distinct lumps of matter. The extra gravity effect comes from the extended synchronization field itself.
And the accelerating expansion, the dark energy problem.
Similarly, instead of some inherent repulsive energy filling space, it could be reinterpreted as natural synchronization gradients playing out across the entire cosmos. The collective large-scale motion itself driving expansion, perhaps.
It's about the dynamics of the motion field on a cosmic scale.
Exactly, and connecting this to what we're actually seeing.
Like with the James Webb Telescope.
Yes, and other modern observations. Things like galaxies appearing surprisingly mature very early in the universe's history, or these huge cosmic filaments of gas and galaxies that seem synchronized over billions of light years, or even the way satellite galaxies orbit larger ones in coherent planes.
These things fit awkwardly with the standard model sometimes, right?
They can be challenging to explain easily. But they seem to align quite naturally with principles of large-scale structured motion and synchronization. It feels like the universe might actually be built this way, on motion patterns.
Which brings up a fundamental question, doesn't it? If it's all motion, how do you even start a universe? How do you get motion without anything to move?
A fair question. And motion theory offers a kind of philosophical blueprint for that. You start with a foundational substrate.
Okay.
And underlying universal fields of potential motion. Think of it like a completely calm, infinite ocean of possibility. Pure potential.
Step 1, the substrate.
Step 2. Allow that substrate to spontaneously form stable, rhythmic, self-sustaining loops within itself. These are the first stable patterns, what we perceive as fundamental particles.
Like tiny, persistent whirlpools forming naturally in that ocean.
Exactly. Little knots of stable motion. Step 3, hierarchical synchronization. Allow these basic loops, these whirlpools, to link up, to synchronize into more and more complex patterns.
Building complexity.
Right. Forming atoms, then molecules, cells, organisms, planets, stars, galaxies. Each level is just a more complex, stable arrangement built from the synchronized motions of the level below it.
So the universe kind of bootstraps itself into existence, generating its own complexity and structure just through the dynamics of motion and synchronization.
That's the picture. Without needing lots of extra ingredients or mysterious forces added in, reality becomes this incredibly dynamic dance of nested, synchronized rhythms, scaling all the way from the quantum foam up to cosmic structures.
So the ultimate takeaway, the core philosophical conclusion is,
all reality is structured motion, infinitely evolving, fundamentally interconnected, and profoundly unified.
it's not just a potential new physics, it's aiming to be a whole new philosophy of reality, a single coherent story for everything.
It tries to dissolve those historical paradoxes we talked about, bridge those gaps between physics, chemistry, biology, cosmology.
And it synthesizes insights from way back, from Descartes noticing motion's importance, through Newton's laws, Einstein's relativity, even quantum weirdness.
Pulling them all together under this one umbrella, structured motion.
Which brings us finally to maybe the deepest point, the personal connection, the philosophical awakening, you called it.
Yes, because if all of reality is structured motion, then human consciousness, it can't be separate from that, can it? It must also be a form of structured synchronization within this motion universe.
So my brain, my thoughts, the way I perceive the world, that's all just incredibly complex rhythmic patterns of motion interacting with other motion patterns.
That's the implication. The brain as an intricate structure of synchronized motion loops. Thoughts and perceptions as dynamic patterns within that structure, constantly interacting with the larger patterns of the cosmos.
Which means the observer and the observed aren't truly separate. It collapses into motion observing itself.
Precisely. You are not an isolated observer looking out at a separate universe. You are the universe, specifically a highly structured pattern of motion within it, experiencing itself.
Wow.
That reframes everything, doesn't it? The feeling of being separate, maybe that's an illusion born from our particular scale and perspective, like a wave thinking it's separate from the ocean.
If it's all one continuous field of motion.
Then interconnectedness isn't just a nice idea. It's the fundamental nature of reality. And meaning, purpose. Maybe they emerge naturally from this drive towards increasing synchronization, complexity, and adaptive interaction within the whole system.
Okay, so that leaves us with a really profound thought to chew on. If you, the listener, are not just an observer, but actually structured motion experiencing itself,
and if that feeling of separateness is fundamentally an illusion, because reality is unified through motion synchronization.
then what does that truly mean for your identity, for your connection to everything else? How does that shift your sense of place, your purpose within this awakened universe, where motion itself is the ultimate reality?
It's a question that could potentially redefine everything you thought you knew about yourself and the cosmos.